Hello, my name's Sabrina Moreland, and I'm one of the librarians at Walter State. And I'm going to share with you some information on how to evaluate the different sources you're going to encounter for your research in your essays in English 1010. So, what to use and how to choose the best sources for your topics and your papers. So the first thing is a criteria to evaluate this information. And you've probably seen this before in the past, but just to quickly go over this, in every source we encounter, whether it's print or electronic, we want to think about these areas. So the authority then is who wrote it, and who's responsible for it, and what is the author's background. So, educational background, life experiences, contact information. Is this an expert in a field? So, who is responsible for this? And that you want to ask that for everything that you look up and attempt to use in your papers. You also want to think about how accurate the information is. You don't want to include incorrect information in your papers. So this is really applicable to the different websites or web pages that you may want to use in your essays. So you want to think about are there references included? Where did the author get his or her information? And so having a list of references or a bibliography or something like that is always a good sign, so that you can double check that information if you need to. A quick way to check for accuracy, and again, this is mainly for a website, is are there spelling and grammar errors? Does this look like a professionally produced piece of information? So that's just a quick way to say, whoever wrote this, if it looks bad, if there's lots of problems with it, probably wouldn't trust it. That's a red flag. You also want to consider who the audience is. So this means, why was this written? The purpose of the source. Who is the intended audience? Are you an appropriate audience member? You don't want to be using something that was a web page written for middle schoolers when you're writing a college essay. You also want to think about if there's any bias contained in the information. So is it leaning towards one direction? Is it one-sided? Um, what is there a cause or a position that's trying to be pushed? And are you a part of that audience they're trying to reach? Currency is a big deal as well. How up to date is the information? When was it last updated? The timeliness of it for your scope of research. Medicine, technology, fields that are changing a lot. You want super up-to-date information. I generally go back about 10 years or so when I'm doing research for the essays in English 1010. So you want to make sure what you're researching is current and up to date. And lastly is coverage. So how much of the topic does it cover? Is it just a snippet of information? What is the context of it being used? Does it have support for its claims or arguments? So really, how much does it go into, and how much do you need it to go into based on your research need? So those are the areas we're going to think about. And we know that you're either going to find these sources and this information in search engines, so Google or something like that, and just being mindful of, you really have to apply those areas to websites and stuff that you find on the internet at large, because you can be overwhelmed with information and anybody can write anything on the internet. Or you're going to find it in the databases, which is a big requirement now in college. So those magazines, journals, that sort of thing, in the databases are organized in a certain way, and there's limitations you can put on your searches. I have some videos I'm going to share with your instructor on how to use some of the databases, but if you use something from a database, then you're really going to have to think about currency and coverage probably the most, because everything in there is really trustworthy, and vetted and evaluated. So these are the types of sources you're probably going to encounter. And I'm going to go into each of these in detail, and we're going to look at an example very quickly and think about the criteria that I've mentioned. And not every single element of the criteria matters for each one. If you already have something that's up to date and written by somebody with a PhD in a field, then you're probably okay. So you just want to be mindful of these areas whenever you're looking for sources. So academic journals, that's the scholarly peer-reviewed information your instructor wants you to use most of the time, written by an academic professional or an expert in a field that has a degree in that field. And you'll see references and bibliographies for pages at times, and it's normally narrowed down to a certain field or topic. So very concise, studies that have been completed or compiled, and like I said, peer-reviewed, meaning that other experts have reviewed that information. And if you need an example from a study, or if you need someone to back up what you're saying, this is what you really want to use. These are the best and most credible sources, I would say, for a lot of our essays in college. That's not to say other ones aren't important, but these are the gold mine, right? An example from the databases, just very quickly, because it's easy to do this evaluation pretty fast. My examples are going to be on food poisoning as an issue in America. But you have the title, and you can see the authors listed, and you PhD, MD, and so forth, like all these degrees. On the left, American Journal of Public Health, July 2017. Now it covers this range, but it's published in 2017. And there's a little about the author section here. And studies, like I said, there are tables and charts of results. They go into information on who was a part of the study. As a scholar, some of this, I read these articles sometimes and I'm just like, whoa, this is over my head. So, you just want to get a feel for who the audience is. And because we're using these databases for our own research, we're generally a part of that audience. And how much coverage. So this is a good study on food service regulation, if that's what I was writing about. And there are the references listed for you as well. So all kinds of good stuff. Didn't take me very long to determine this would be an appropriate piece for me to include in my paper on food poisoning. Periodicals are things that come in installments, right? So newspapers and magazines, generally written by a journalist with a degree in humanities. So may not be an expert in what he or she is writing about or covering. However, these are for high interest topics or current events. And the audience is very broad, and they do a good job of making it inclusive for people to be able to understand and comprehend. And a lot of times there are pictures. They're a lot shorter than some of these academic journal articles we find. And they've also been evaluated by editors who, again, may or may not have a lot of background in that topic, but they are looking for accuracy, and they want to make sure they're producing good information. Sometimes magazines and newspapers could be biased. So you want to think about that as an audience member. Who are they serving? What population are they writing for? That sort of thing. And again, this is for up-to-date information on a topic occurring in our society. And so this is a newspaper article taken from a database. Like I said, you can find those in the databases, and there's some color, lots of color. There's a hamburger, images. There's a testimonial here from somebody they, I guess, interviewed for this. So all kinds of stuff going on. At the top, there's the author. Now, I don't know anything about this individual, so I want to look and see if there's information about that. But we have the title on the left, and at the top in this case, we have the currency. The information for that. And 2002 might be a little bit old, right? So I might want something more current. This would be reaching a broad audience, I would say. However, there's some stuff in here about weight loss, so people mindful of their health. But it would be appropriate for food poisoning if it were more current, right? And I don't see any references or anything, but they've talked to people. It seems they've talked to people about it who maybe have personal experiences, so that would be something to consider. And I doubt there's any grammatical errors or that sort of thing. And it would cover the topic pretty well, it looks like. So that's just a quick evaluation of that magazine. Websites, what we use the most of, right? really have to apply all those areas very carefully because anybody can put anything on there. Blogs are personal opinions. There's lots of bias for politics and religion. You have to be mindful of fake news or if they're trying to sell you something, right? So looking at the domain, .edu and .gov, really good. Be a little more mindful of the .orgs, but really great information if you're looking for statistics. So a heart disease map by state from the CDC, or you can even find some periodicals on there that are free. And you could even find academic journal articles, but sometimes they want you to pay for them, so never do that. Contact a librarian. That's why we have the databases. But you just want to be really careful of who wrote it, when was it written, why was it written, can you verify those facts, right? And so sticking with my food poisoning, I have a page here pulled up from foodsafety.gov. So right off the bat, even if I think the government is out to get me, .gov, I can trust it for my papers for my English class. And so this would just be a page on a website, some information there. You may or may not find resources. It just depends, but you can see this was updated in 2019, which is good. The government would be the, I guess, author of this or whatever. Sometimes you can look at the about page and get some information on who's responsible, where contact information is, and like I said, depending on how much information you need. So this covers different types. It's a good maybe background for what you're researching. General audience because it's a .gov site and no grammatical errors, that sort of thing. So probably pretty safe to use in a paper, right? Or a .edu or something like that. We also have books or ebooks. Probably going to be using ebooks because we're not going to be traveling right now. But if you want a really comprehensive view of something that's academic in nature, then you can use a book or ebook. Now, be mindful of people who self-publish because they may or may not have their own credentials. But if you're using our ebook collection, then you can trust what's in there. And you don't even have to use the whole book. You can just use a chapter from a book or a section. But again, if you want some specific information that's not necessarily a research study, that would be really good. Or if you want to go beyond just a general reference source, then you could use a book or an ebook. And just to show you quickly something from our ebook collection, it takes it a minute or two to load sometimes. You're able to see information about an author. A lot of times they have references included. This one is about food safety. And then there's the author 2016. You can look at information about the author to determine if his or her information is, if he's a good authority on this. You can see if there are references, and I'll just let you know for the sake of time, I did not see any references really in this work. So that'd be something to think about. And again, do you need this entire book, right? You might just want a chapter. And looking at this, it looks like it's written for a pretty general audience, and that sort of thing. So that's just quickly an ebook. And then we have a reference source. So this is a starting point, a dictionary, an encyclopedia. Sometimes we go to Wikipedia to start off. You can use that as a springboard, but never cite that in your paper. If you have no clue about a topic, you could use a reference source. So a good place just to get started, or if you need a quick fact on something. Okay, reference sources are good, just not Wikipedia. This is from our databases. It's from Oxford Reference. And so again, this was just a quick entry on food poisoning, right? From a Dictionary of Biology 8th edition, published online 2019. So I don't know really who wrote it, but I trust this. It's a reference source, Oxford, reputable publishing company. I can get some information about that there. But again, very quick. Just an excerpt really that you would need for your paper or just a place to get started. That's all I have on evaluating sources. Please feel free to contact me if you need any help with your research. I'm embedded in your eLearn class list as SR Moreland, and there's my email address. But I hope this has helped you in learning the types of sources you're going to encounter and how to evaluate them based on that criteria. So thanks for listening and good luck.